Hi and welcome to Siska Stitches channel. In today's video, I'll be showing us how to make a super gorgeous bubu kaftan with two different sleeve designs. For this type of dress, you have to use a fabric that drapes easily like chiffon, silk or satin. You don't need to use any heavy fabric. If you want to give off that luxury vibe or rich auntie vibes, it is preferable you use silk or satin fabric. Now for this tutorial, I'll be using chiffon fabric because that is what I have. And if you are going for a full length of about 50 something inches or 60 inches, if you are as tall as I am, okay, for me, my full length is 60 inches. So if I'm going for full length, I'll have to use 3 yards of fabric. But if I'm going for knee length, 2 yards is actually enough. So I got 2 yards of fabric. So my fabric is folded into that 2 yards vertically like this. So this is going to be my vertical length. So at the end of the day, my length is going to be 36 inches. Now, horizontal wise is the length of the fabric from selvage, which is at this end, to selvage, which is at this other end. Okay, so this is the selvage to selvage part, and that is how I'm going to create this pattern. So what I'm going to do next is to fold the fabric again into two. It is already folded at this edge, as you can see. So I'm going to fold it again along this side. So after folding my fabric into two, my fabric length is going to maintain 36 inches on this side, and this part is going to become 30 inches. So what we want to do right now is to mark the shoulder and the neck width alongside with the sleeve as well. So I'm going to come right at this folded edge. I'll be marking my neck depth here, and I'll be going with a neck depth of 2 inches. We're sort of like making a boat neck kind of dress. You want the neckline to be sort of high up. And then I'm going to come right here and mark neck width of 6 inches. Okay. So I mark neck width of 6 inches. The next I'm going to do is to connect my neck width to my neck depth, just like this, okay? Just create a curve to meet the 2 points. Now what I'm going to do is to come right here and mark my shoulder. And my shoulder is 16 inches. 16 divided by 2 is 8. Okay, so I'll come right here and mark 8. So I'll just mark 8 inches here for my shoulder. From this shoulder point, I'm going to mark 3 inches. The way the sleeve is designed, one of the sleeve is sort of open. So I'm going to mark 3 inches. You can equally even go with 4 inches. Okay, so let us go with 4 inches. So if I mark 4 inches here, this is what I have. Now, we've marked 8 inches for shoulder, right? From the shoulder point all the way to the end should be your sleeve. And for me, I have about 21 inches. So we're sort of like going with a long sleeve kind of dress. If you look at the sleeve design, one of the sleeves has an opening. Alright, so we want to determine the length of the opening. So right here is the edge of the sleeve as explained. So I hope you got that part right. So what I'm going to do is to mark 4 inches from the edge here. So just go on to mark 4 inches for yours. Now, it depends on how open you want the sleeve to be. If you want it to be open just a little bit, okay, just come up a bit more, up to about, say, 9 inches or 10 inches. I want the sleeve to be open a lot, so that is why I am marking 4 inches from the edge. So what I have left here is about 13 inches. And what I'm going to do is to create a curve around this point. Now, this sleeve design is for just one of the sleeve. But if you decide that you want to do for both, that is, actually okay. So I just did a slight curve right here where the middle of the curve is measuring around 1 inch, okay? So I don't want to open it too much. You can also go with half an inch as well around the middle of this curve and then, just curve it out. Now, there are 2 parts that we are going to cut open now. We're going to cut open the neckline right here on the 2 parts of the fabric, okay? So it's going to affect the front and the back. And we're going to cut this opening on one of the sleeves, okay, and it is going to be for just only one side of the fabric. So we're cutting it on only this one. We're not going to cut this one. So this one that I marked is going to have to be cut open. So after cutting the neckline and this open part on one of the sleeves, I'm going to open my fabric up so you can actually see what we have done. So after opening up our dress, this is what we have. Right here is our neckline. Right here is the sleeve opening. Now, what we want to do is to shape this dress. And the way we are going to do it my fabric is striped, so it's actually very easy for me to explain this to us. Where I have this ruler is the midline of the dress, so let me call it center front and center back. I have marked 2 inches from the neckline, okay, 2 inches from this edge as well, such that by the time I measure this, I'll be having 16 inches, which is my shoulder measurement. Now, what I'm going to do at either of those sides is to mark an armhole depth. So if your round armhole is 18 inches, divide that 18 inches by 2, you get 9. Add 1 inches to that, make it 10 inches. So that is what I'm going to do right here. I'll mark 10 inches, okay? So that is going to be my armhole opening. I'll do the same thing for this other side as well and mark 10 inches, okay? Now, what we are going to do at this point is to create the sleeve for this part of the dress. So I'll come right at this end. I'm going to be marking 6 inches for the round sleeve at this end. And I'm going to connect the 6 inches to this armhole depth that we marked here, okay? So I'm just going to connect it like this. I'm hoping that you guys can see the markings that I'm creating. So I'll just connect it like this, okay? And this is going to be our sleeve. For this other side, you can choose to do the same thing or just leave it like that, okay? So what we are going to do next is to create the shape of the dress. Now remember that we have marked our armhole depth right here, okay, right here and right here. And I've used this ruler to identify the center of the bodice. So what we're going to do next is to mark out the bust area and the hip area, okay, the bust, the waist, and the hip. So where I mark the armhole depth is usually the place I like to mark my bust. So this is the midpoint. Bust is 38 inches. 38 divided by 2 is 19 inches. And if we divide 19 by 2, that will give us 9.5. So I'm going to be adding an extra 1 inch to that. So making that 10.5, okay? So we'll be able to enter into this dress. So I mark 10.5 here. I'll come on the opposite side of this and mark 10.5 as well. Okay? So I mark 10.5 right here. Now just reconnect your sleeve up to that 10.5 mark. Okay, so that is what I did here. The next I'm going to do is to mark my waist. Remember that we have cut 2 inches from the neckline, so I'll place 2 inches like this, okay? And then what I'm going to do is to mark my waist. My waist is 16, so I'm going to mark 16 here. And my round waist is 34. If we divide 34 by 2, I'll have 17. Divide 17 by 2 again, I'm going to have 8.5, okay? We're going to add 1 inch to that 8.5, which will be 9.5. So I'll come right here, I'll mark 9.5. Okay, so here is the midpoint right here. I'm going to mark 9.5. I'll come at this other side as well, mark 9.5. Then we're going to come to our hip. Mark hip length of 25 inches. For me, mine is 25 inches. So I'm going to mark 25 inches here. My hip measurement or my hip circumference is 44. 44 divided by 2 is 22. 22 divided by 2. So basically, you are dividing all your measurements by 4. So 44 divided by 4 is 11 inches. So what I'm going to do is to come right here. This is the midpoint. I'm going to mark 11 inches plus 1. That is 12. Okay. Come to this other side. Mark 11 inches plus 1. And that is 12. Alright. So after we are done marking, we are going to connect our bust area to our waist. So can you see what I'm doing? I'll connect it like this. And then I'll connect it to the hip. Okay, and then connect it straight down. All right, so this is the shape of our bodies. So I'm going to be sewing this part now, following this curve, armhole straight from here, okay, all the way down like that. For this part now, I'll connect it like this, okay, connect it like this all the way down. So the way we are going to sew this one is to sew it like this, okay, all the way like this and all the way down. So at the end of the day, we are going to have the shape of our dress come out as we want. So what we're going to do before we actually sew this part, okay, what we need to do is to hem the bottom of your dress or use a bias tape to conceal the raw edges. Repeat the same thing for this side, this part where the sleeve is going to be, and also for this other side as well, okay? Go on to either hem or use a bias tape to conceal the raw edges. So once you're done with that, you can now go on to sew your dress into the shape of your body, following the marking that, I have made here. So I will sew from the edge here, sew my sleeve, come right to the bust area, sew, connect to the waist, sew all the way down to the hip and down to the length of the dress. Now for this other side, I mentioned that you can repeat the same thing that I did for this part. That was what I mentioned, but for this one, what I'm going to do is to just do a straight seam running from the bust area all the way to the waist, to the hip, and then straight down. So for the neckline and this opening that I have here, I will have to use a bias tape to conceal the raw edges. It's going to make your work so much easier and neater for you. So I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. If you did, kindly give us a thumbs up, subscribe to my channel, turn on the bell so you get updates when I post new videos, and I'm going to be seeing you guys in my next tutorial. Bye!